Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're going to continue implementing the product feature, and we have to implement the presentation layer by adopting the event-driven approach, which make our views not depending on the view models, which is a good approach in my opinion, and I highly suggest this approach. From the previous application under Kotlin or Jetpack Compose, we can infer basically the needed events and the needed states and even the view models. Pretty much going to do the same thing under Swift. Under presentation, let's create the dedicated folders, component and screen, the events and the states for the product. We're gonna call them product events and product states. Let's start with the first one, which is product event. It's gonna be a new file. Let's call it product event. Because Swift doesn't have a sealed class, we do have enum. We're going to represent events by enum, and under enum in Swift, we can even have some parameters, if you will. The first event, which is get products, and we have on next page, and we have another event, which is load products. And to load the products, we have to provide here the parameter of type integer 64. How to do so? We're going to do here case and basically load products, and we can declare the parameter 64. As simple as this. And from the previous application, we can infer the needed events, search suggestions, search products, and clear search. Next, we can define the state from the previous application. Let's call it product state. We do have the list of products. The last page is loading and current page and the error. And we need also the state for is searching and the product detail. I'm gonna call it products and the list of suggested products. A public initializer, a copy function, the same thing that we have under Kotlin. What we have to do here is we're going to declare the parameters as nullable values by assigning some default values, and we have to return basically the product state. Let's say, for example, for the products, if it's not null, we're going to assign the value products. Otherwise, it has to be self and products. Likewise for the rest of the arguments. And that's all for the product state. Next, we are ready to implement our view model. A file from template, which I have prepared in advance of type view model. I'm gonna call it product view model. Basically, the view models here under Swift are of type observable object. For the state, it's very simple. It's gonna be published. For the setter, it has to be private in order not to allow the view to tamper with the data of the state. And for the name here, I'm gonna call it state. And the type, basically, it's product state. And we have to provide the initial value by doing init like this. We need an instance of the use cases and it should be nullable. Let's initialize the use cases and we are good to go. As we have done basically under Kotlin or the Jetpack Compose application, we need to define and to implement internally the events, and the events are going to be consumed basically in the views, which is a good approach. In this case, I'm going to create a function on events. It has in parameter an event of type product event, and let's provide all the needed cases. Those are all the functions that we have to create. Let's go ahead and create those functions, private functions. For the function on next page, all we have to do is to change the state and copy current page equal state and current page +1. Let's implement the function getProduct. First of all, we have to check if the use cases is not null. And because we have to interact with infinite scroll, we need to check the current page. The current page should be less than the last page. In this case, we have to call the function getProducts from the use cases. And because this function is an async function, we have to surround this block with task. And we can do await use cases, getProducts, the page. And we're going to receive this on the dispatch queue and main, basically on the main dispatcher. We don't have any problem actually to hardcode the dispatcher here. Under the integration test, we won't face the problem that we have faced before under the Jetpack Compose application. Collect the state, if you will, by doing sync, and we have to store under cancellables. For the default state, we're going to set is page loading to false. And now because we have to access the self-reference, we need to add here under this particular function, the weak self in order to avoid memory leaks. And this weak self can be nullable. Therefore, we're going to do here a guard statement and early return. Now, in case of loading, we're going to set is page loading to true, and we have to break. If we are under the success state, we do have some data. I'm going to store here the data under data, add the previous value or the previous list to the new list from the API call. We're going to assign this to the state. Now we have the new list, going to update the state and copy. The products in this case will be new list distinct by the ID of the product, $sign and 0 for the first parameter by the ID. For the last page, it is from the response, and we have to set is loading to false. In case if we have an error, is page loading to false, and we have the error from the error. Just to make this block of function efficient, we're going to check if the code is cancelled. We're going to make an early return, and if the code is of type NS URL error cancelled, we're going to make an early return as well. We need to force the non-null value here, and instead of this, we're going to mark it as not null. In this case, we need to check if it is of type NS URL error cancelled. In this case, we're going to make here an early return. We have to add here break, and because the any publishers is non-sendable, pre-concurrency import combine. Let's implement the function load product. First of all, we're going to make sure that the use cases is not null. I'm going to call get product. Let's store this under any cancelable. And again, we have to use here the weak self-reference because we are going to change the state. In case of default state, we're going to set as page loading to false. In case of loading, we're going to set as page loading to true. And we have the product from the old cache. Instead of doing a circular progress indicator, we want to show the old cache while waiting for the new one to appear. Let's product and data as product, update the state, basically is page loading, and we have to assign the product. For the success state, pretty much with the same manner. In case if we have an error, we have to set is page loading to false and to assign the error. Now we have to implement the function search suggestions. Basically, the user is going to type something on the search field or the text field, and the user will get some suggestions from the API. First of all, we're going to make sure that the instance use cases is not null, and we have to check if the search query is not empty. We haven't added the search query under the product state. Why, you may ask? Under Swift, to observe the changes of the state of the published variable, all you have to do is to call the function sync. And basically, if you want to do this under the product state, it's going to make our state management very complicated because we want to observe only the state for the search query. Therefore, I have decided to create for it an individual published variable. Let's call it search query. Now let's come back to the implementation of search suggestions. If search query is not empty, we can proceed. Let's wrap everything within task, and basically we have to call the use case get suggested products. Let's provide the other cases. For the default case, we're going to set is search into false. In case of loading state, we're going to set is search into true. For the success state and copy is search in false, suggested products is data. For the error state, we need to assign the error as well as is search into false. And that's all for the function search suggestions. Now we have implemented search suggestions, and we need to trigger this function somehow. This function should be triggered whenever the value of search query changes. And if you do remember, under the implementation of the text field, the state of the value of the text field is a binding. In other words, it's a bidirectional change from the source, which is the view, and to the view model and vice versa. Therefore, we need to observe somehow this search query, and the optimal place to observe this change is under the product view model. More specifically, under the init section. We're going to observe the changes of search query by doing $sign and search query. And we don't want to trigger the function every time the value changes. We're going to wait for the user to finish typing. Then we can trigger the function by doing debounce, how many seconds. Let's do, for example, 0.7. And for the scheduler, it should be on dispatch queue main. Then we can call the function by doing sync. Now we are observing basically the changes, weak self. And for the parameter, it should be the string, which is the query. And because self is nullable, we're going to do a guard statement. Else we're going to make an early return. do search suggestions. As simple as this. This way, whenever we create the product view model instance, we're going to observe the changes of search query. We're going to debounce with 0.7. Then we're going to call the search suggestions. Now, under the application, whenever the user is going to change the value under the text input, which is a binding, it's going to trigger this function search suggestions. In my opinion, this is a very clean way to handle this. The last case that we have to implement is the search products. And basically, we're going to trigger this function when the search query is not empty. And we have to call the use case. In the default state, we're going to set is page loading to false. Under loading state, is page loading to true. And for the success state, we have to add the new list to the old list. In case of error, we're going to assign is page loading to false and assign the error. And that's all we have for the implementation of search products. We have one last function to go, which is to clear the search input. Basically, we're going to empty the list suggested products. State, copy, suggested products to empty list. And maybe we're going to set the search query to an empty string. And that's all we have for the implementation of the products view model. Now we are ready to implement the products fragments and the rest of the components. After finishing all the components and all the presentation layer, we're gonna do the integration test for the products view model. Now let's create a view. Let's call it products fragment. I'm gonna disable the preview for now. For the needed properties of this products fragment, we need the state, the event, and to hoist basically on view product, on toggle wishlist, and we need the instance of the authenticated user. And if you have just tuned in, maybe it is a good idea to watch the other videos or the other platforms if you are interested, because we are just inferring the same stuff from the previous application. We are not inventing anything here. Now for the initializer for this particular component or view, we'll try to replicate basically what we have done under Jetpack Compose. We need to show the progress indicator at the center of the screen whenever we are under the loading state and the product is not empty. Z stack, if state is page loading and the list of products is empty, we're gonna show the progress view. I'm going to add here the accessibility identifier for testing purposes from the UI constants loading indicator. This is very crucial under end-to-end test. Otherwise, we're gonna check if we have an error, and if the product is empty, we're gonna show a warning message. And if we have the available products, we're gonna show the list of products. I love how things are similar between Swift and Kotlin. We have the when statement, if you do remember. Now we can do basically with the same analogy, switch true to achieve the same implementation. And we can switch over this true value. The first case that has to be true, which is state and error. If it's not null, we're gonna show here the warning message. We have to add the text from the local keys, which is error fetching data and localized. And because we are outside the bundle core UI, we need to add here the bundle name. Let's add here bundle. The bundle name is core UI bundle. And for the icon name for this warning message, let's do information, a padding. It's gonna have the max width, alignment leading, the background, color and theme, warning, clip shape, rounded corners or rounded rectangle, and provide here the corner radius. Gonna do here medium. The outer padding, I'm gonna add here shadow, medium. For the max width, infinity, have the max height again, and the alignment center. It's gonna be basically at the center of the screen. Maybe we're gonna have an empty list. I'm gonna show another warning message, empty product list. And if it doesn't fall into the category of products is empty and error is not null, we have some data to serve to the client. It's gonna be under default case, lazy vertical grid, that's going to load the needed elements once they are in the viewport. It's not going to load all the data, which is very good and very efficient. Now we have to provide the column and the content. We need to make the columns, or how many items per row, variable according to the screen width to match the same behavior under Kotlin or Jetpack Compose. Basically, we're gonna use grid item, adaptive, and we have to do here the minimum from UI screen, main, bounds and width divided by the UI screen and main to divide the screen width by how many items that we want to show under the screen width. And we have implemented a function if you do remember, under core UI, get screen size. This function is going to give us whether it's medium, large, and extra large according to screen width. And we have to get the grid layout columns. Under core UI, I'm going to create here an extension function on screen size, get grid layout columns, CG float. It will return switch. In case of extra large, 3 elements per row. Under large, for medium, let's do 2. And for small, let's do 1. Now let's come back to the products fragment and use this function, get grid layout columns. We don't need actually to specify the maximum. Now we have to assign the content. I forgot here to add an array. Now we have to present the content by doing for each the list in question, which is product from the state. And for the ID, it is basically the ID of each product preview. And we need to implement the product card. If you do remember, we have done basically the same thing under Jetpack Compose. Let's create a view and call it product card, which is an internal component for this product feature. Pretty much the same as the product card on Jetpack Compose and Vue3 application. As properties or dependencies, the product, the authenticated user in order to show the toggle button, as well as the state of whether this product is in wishlist. And we have to host the methods on view products and on toggle wishlist. Let's create the initializer for this particular product card. Under SwiftUI, there is no notion of card, therefore going to simulate the look of the products card under VStack, because we're going to represent those under vertical sequence. And we need to make sure, first of all, we have to show the image, and the thumbnail has to be a URL. First of all, I'm going to store the thumbnail as a string, non-null value. Under this value, I'm going to call it thumbnail equal URL from string, and we can proceed. Now, if you want to add here a fallback image, you can do that. But for simplicity purposes, we know for sure that the URL is 100% correct. Therefore, I'm not going to use that fallback component. And on top of this network image, the toggle button, a Z-stack, top trailing, to put the element at the top right corner of our V-stack. Network image, thumbnail, scale to fit. Whenever we click on this particular component or this image, we have to animate basically the toggle button. If you do remember, we have done this under Jetpack Compose. First of all, we need to show or to animate this section only if the user is authenticated. I'm going to do this later on. Underneath the network image, we have to show the likable button that we have created under Jetpack Compose. And again, it should be shown whenever the user is authenticated. Add another to do, get out of the stack and add the other components because we are right now under the VStack. I'm going to fold this section. The first item, which is basically the product title, line limit 1. If the text is so long for the width of the card, we're going to truncate or to add the ellipsis symbol. Let's add here the padding, the accessibility identifier as the product title. Next, we need to show the price of the product. We have the placeholder for the price under the local keys, price value localized. The bundle is core UI, and for the arguments is product price and description, body medium, and we have to add to it an accessibility identifier. For the arguments, it should be product title. I'm going to add here a padding, top and bottom. Now for the button that's going to allow the user to navigate to product detail, I'm going to hoist the action. It consists of a text showing the learn more label, and the foreground is primary, an accessibility identifier. And we have to identify each button because this product card is going to be used under the grid layout, and we have to make it unique by adding the product ID to the learn more button accessibility identifier. Padding vertically and horizontally, and a background and to clip shape with the rounded corner of small. And I'm gonna add a padding bottom 26. Now we're still under the VStack. We need to customize this VStack like a card. Therefore, I'm gonna add here the background surface. We have to copy the whole thing from the outside of this particular element, which is the if statement. I'm gonna add here the background surface and clip shape medium, and a shadow, it's gotta be medium. We are halfway there. We need to implement the animation as well as the likable button. We need to get rid of this likable button component. From the Jetpack Compose application, we can infer the state which is liked, and whenever we are toggling or liking this product, and the size of this particular icon under the likable icon button. Let's add an initializer. This button consists of a button. For the action, we need here basically do the animation under image, and the image is variable according to the state is liked. If it's liked, we're going to show the heart icon. Otherwise, we're going to show heart outline. We need to specify here the bundle, which is Core UI bundle, in order to access the image. And I'm going to add the resizable and scale fit. For the foreground color, if it's liked, it is basically theme and error. Otherwise, theme and on surface. I'm gonna add an overall padding to this button, a background, and we have to clip this to a circle shape. We need to deal with the animation. The animation under SwiftUI is very intuitive and it's very easy to do. We have to create an internal state. I'm gonna call it private var is animating. We need to keep track of whether it's animated or done animating. By default, it's not animated. To trigger the animation is basically whenever we click on this button. Therefore, under action, we're going to toggle the value is animating with animation. Using with animation, ease in out, for example, 0.15, toggle the value is animating to true. Next, we're going to trigger on click, and after a certain timeout, we're going to bring back is animating to false. By doing dispatch queue, you can do here task and async, but I prefer to use dispatch queue. After 0.15 seconds, toggle is animating with the animation. The values that should be animated here is basically the icon size. We have to use the scale effect. If it's animating, I'm going to increase the size of this particular image by 1.3, otherwise just 1, the same size. Now let's create a preview for this, and let's add our likable icon button. For the icon size, 26 is more than enough, and let's show the preview. Of course, we have to choose the products feature. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Let's click on this heart icon, and you can see here the animation. It looks appealing to me, which is good. Now let's come back to the products card and use this component, delete this comment, and do likable button, or is liked, is in wishlist. On like clicked on toggle wishlist, and we have to provide the product ID and the product title if we want to show the title in the snack bar message. And for the icon size, I'm gonna leave it at 26. Now this icon button should be animated. Bring the likable button from the right to left, or from the outside of the frame to the frame of the card. We need a state to control the animation, and the state should be basically the offset of the position of the likable button, 50 by default. Now to trigger the animation, we have added here on tab gesture. Whenever we click on this particular network image, we're going to trigger the animation. Therefore, we're going to change the offset from 50 to bring to the frame of the card the likable button. We have to do that with animation, ease in out, offset equal the old offset. If it's 0, we're going to toggle basically the position. Otherwise, it has to be 0. First of all, I'm going to assign the offset from the offset state, and it should be at the top of the component by assigning z index. Let's set, for example, 80. I'm gonna add here a padding, and the opacity basically to make it invisible or visible. Basically, it's gonna fade in whenever we bring the icon to the frame, and it's gonna fade out basically whenever the icon is out of the frame. X offset, if it's 0, in other words, we have to make it in the frame, therefore I have to show the likable button, otherwise it's 0. All right. And now we have to make this likable button testable by adding the accessibility identifier. A variable accessibility identifier, it depends on the value or the state in wishlist. If in wishlist, we're going to assign accessibility identifier product within wishlist, product not in wishlist. We have done this basically in order not to hard code things, which is very good under our end-to-end test. Let's do a small preview for this products card, and we'll add the product to preview, which is basically the first product and the product's pagination response, a vstack, and I'm going to show the products card right here. I'm just going to toggle the value in wishlist under on toggle wishlist, and let's show the preview. Make sure to run PHP artisan serve as well as the PHP server, and the MySQL server should be up and running. Check the local IP address. Now we have the products card. We have the title, sunglasses, and the price, and learn more button. Now let's bring to the frame the likable button. We have the likable button, and we can toggle on and off, which is good. And let's click on this. It's gonna disappear from the frame, and the animation works as expected. Now we are done implementing the products fragment. I think that we're going to stop here. For the next video, we're going to implement the rest of the presentation layer. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding!